All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Definitely always ready to dive in.
Awesome. Today we're going to be tackling William Branham.
Oh, wow. 20th century evangelist, right?
Yeah, exactly. Known for his healing ministry. And a lot of people found his claims of supernatural experiences pretty intriguing.
Definitely makes for a compelling topic.
We've got a whole stack of his sermons here.
Oh, wow.
And we're also going to be looking at this book, Personal Experiences with William Branham by Perry Green. So somebody who actually knew him.
Fascinating. That firsthand perspective.
Yeah, that firsthand perspective. So it's going to be really interesting. You know, we're going to explore faith, testimony, and maybe even the possibility of miracles.
It's amazing to have those two perspectives to work with, you know, to see what Branham himself said and then how that resonated with someone who actually witnessed it.
For sure. Okay, so where do we even begin with this? I mean, his sermons are full of stories, but there's also a lot of deep theological stuff to unpack. Where do you think we should start to get a clearer picture of who this guy was and what he believed?
Well, maybe let's start with the foundation, his core beliefs.
Okay, sounds good.
You know, when you read through his sermons, he talks a lot about Christ's sacrifice and how important it is to accept salvation. But the way he frames it is really interesting. You know, it's not about earning your way to heaven. It's more about recognizing that the work has already been done.
Oh, I see what you mean. There's that quote where he says, Christ saved you 1900 years ago. You just accepted it last week and 40 years ago. See? The price was already paid. He saved you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's powerful stuff.
It's a bold statement, really, about grace, you know?
Right.
And that idea, it kind of permeates all of his sermons. He truly believed that salvation is a gift, you know, freely given. All you have to do is receive it.
It definitely challenges you to think about faith differently. Not about, you know, striving or proving yourself worthy, but just accepting this incredible act of love.
And what's interesting is that Perry Green, in his book, actually echoes that. He talks about how that message of grace is really what drew him in initially.
Oh, interesting.
Green grew up in a really legalistic environment, lots of rules, you know, lots of regulations. But Branham's message was about freedom and acceptance.
So even from Green's perspective, Branham's theology, particularly his emphasis on grace, was a key part of his appeal. It wasn't just the miracle stories. It was this underlying message of hope and unconditional love.
Exactly.
And that's what I think is so cool about this whole deep dive, right? We're not just looking at some historical figure. We're exploring ideas that still resonate with people today.
For sure. They definitely do.
Now, I have to admit, okay, when I first started reading about William Branham, what really drew me in were the more supernatural elements of his ministry.
Yeah, the more captivating parts.
Yeah, visions, angelic visitations, being able to discern people's thoughts and conditions. That stuff is hard to resist. It really grabs your attention.
Totally understand that. Those are definitely the parts that stand out. And Branham's life story is full of them. Like, for example, that story about the angel appearing to him disguised as a man and telling him to go pray for the sick.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that sounds like something straight out of the Bible.
Yeah.
Blurs the line between the earthly and the divine.
It really does.
Makes you wonder how people reacted to that, you know?
Yeah.
Did they believe him? Were they skeptical?
Well, in Perry Green's book, he talks about witnessing several instances where it seemed like Branham knew things about people he couldn't have possibly known, you know, through ordinary means. Right. Like, there's that story where Branham confronts a couple in his congregation about their infidelity.
Wait, he just, knew they were being unfaithful?
Yeah.
How is that even possible?
According to Green, Branham not only knew about the affair, but revealed specific details about it, leaving the couple completely stunned.
Okay, now that's just mind-blowing. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about human perception.
It's wild, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to remember we're exploring all of this through the lens of faith. You know, these are stories that were shared within a community of believers, so there's naturally a level of acceptance of the supernatural. But even within that context, these claims were pretty controversial. They sparked a lot of discussion and debate.
Yeah, definitely. People were really drawn to his charisma and the hope in his message. But those extraordinary claims, they definitely attracted their fair share of scrutiny and skepticism, too.
Right.
Some folks, dismissed him as a charlatan, while others truly believed he was a vessel of God's power.
It's like we were talking about before with that tension between faith and reason, the things we can easily explain with logic, versus the mysteries we can't quite wrap our heads around.
Absolutely. And Branham recognized that tension himself.
Yeah.
He often talked about how faith needs you to kind of take that leap,
Go beyond just what your senses are telling you. I remember this one sermon where he said, If thou canst believe, all things are possible to them that believe.
Powerful stuff.
Right.
It really gets to the heart of his whole message about faith being so powerful. He truly seemed to believe that if you could just believe with every fiber of your being, anything was possible.
And that brings us to, I think, one of the most fascinating aspects of his ministry, the healings. Perry Green dedicates a lot of his book to these events. He tells the story of a blind boy who regained his sight after Branham prayed for him.
I remember that story. Such a powerful image. A child who's never experienced sight suddenly being able to see the world. It touches on those deep human desires for healing and restoration.
It does. And while some people might try to explain those healings away as just the placebo effect or the power of suggestion, I think it's important to consider how much belief itself can actually influence our experiences. Like, if you truly believe you're going to be healed, that belief can trigger actual physical changes in your body. Releasing endorphins, reducing stress hormones, even boosting your immune system.
Yeah. So even putting aside the whole question of divine intervention, there's actually a scientific basis for how powerful belief can be when it comes to our well-being.
Right. It's amazing how much our minds can influence our physical state. And that's where the whole psychology of belief kind of intersects with faith,
Right.
Branham seemed to understand this connection maybe intuitively. He really stressed the importance of unshakable faith, not just as a spiritual concept, but as something that could create real, tangible changes in people's lives.
It's almost like he was tapping into this very primal human need to believe in something greater than ourselves, something that could offer hope and healing in the face of all the suffering in the world.
I think you're right. And that's a big part of what made him so compelling, He offered people a sense of wonder and a connection to the supernatural and the belief that miracles were still possible even in the modern world.
Something I find interesting is that his message wasn't just about personal salvation. It was also about social justice.
Absolutely.
He spoke out against racism and inequality, called for unity and compassion.
You're absolutely right. He really challenged his followers to actually live out their faith, to be a force for good in the world. And again, Perry Green's book provides a lot of insight into that. He talks about how Branham's ministry reached across racial and social lines, bringing people together.
So it wasn't just about otherworldly experiences. It was also about trying to make a real difference in the world, in the here and now.
Exactly. And that's a big part of why, even today, people are still talking about him and debating his legacy. He was such a complex figure who, defied convention, stirred up controversy, and left a real impact on the people who encountered him.
It's clear that he was a very complex individual, a talented speaker, a charismatic leader, and someone who genuinely seemed to believe in the power of God. But he was also a product of his time. And some of his views definitely reflect the social and cultural context he was living in.
That's an important point. We can't fully understand him without acknowledging the historical and cultural factors that shaped his perspective. And that's why, I think, we need to approach his teachings with a critical eye, trying to separate the timeless truths from ideas that were very specific to his time.
It's like we're peeling back all these layers of history, trying to understand the man, his message, and the impact he had on the world.
And I think that's exactly what makes this deep dive so interesting. We're not just learning about one person. We're actually engaging in this larger conversation about faith, belief, and humanity's search for meaning.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the skepticism and scrutiny surrounding his ministry. I know there are some pretty controversial aspects of his teachings that people have debated over the years.
Yeah, we should definitely touch on that. While a lot of people revere him as a prophet and healer, there are others who've expressed concern about some of his later teachings, particularly his interpretation of Scripture and his views on certain social issues.
It seems like there's another whole layer to this deep dive we could explore.
There is. And while we may not have time to get into all the details of those debates today, I think it's important for our listeners to know that there are multiple perspectives on Branham's legacy. Some people see him as a beacon of light, while others see him in a more critical light.
Yeah. It reminds us that even within a shared faith, there can be a wide range of interpretations and opinions.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good thing. Healthy debate and respectful dialogue can actually enrich our understanding of faith. It's about engaging with these ideas thoughtfully, forming our own conclusions based on what we know and what we believe.
Wow, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? Exploring the world of William Branham.
It really has.
From those powerful sermons on grace to the stories of healing in Perry Green's book. I mean, it's clear that Branham was a figure who inspired people but also challenged them.
Absolutely. He definitely left his mark on 20th century religious history. His message connected with so many people, and even today, his legacy sparks all sorts of discussions and debates.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive, what stands out to you as the most compelling thing about William Branham's story?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's how faith, belief, and human experience all kind of intertwine. Branham's life and his ministry show just how profound of an impact belief can have, on both individuals and entire communities. Whether you approach his claims from a place of faith or skepticism, there's no denying the power of his message and the effect he had on his followers.
It's like he was able to connect with something deep within us, that desire for something beyond the ordinary, that longing for healing, for a connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And even though we've talked about some of the controversy around his ministry, I think it's important to remember that many people found genuine hope in his teachings.
Right.
Especially Perry Greene's book. It gives us a look at the personal transformations that happened among the people who were close to him.
I'm also struck by how Branham's story makes us really think about faith and belief. How do we reconcile these really extraordinary claims with our understanding of the world? Where do we draw that line between faith and just blindly accepting things?
Those are really tough questions that everyone has to wrestle with on their own.
Yeah.
And I don't think there are any easy answers. But I do believe that asking those questions, thinking about different perspectives, and coming to our own conclusions is all a crucial part of our own personal journeys of faith.
So, as we step out of the world of William Branham, what would you say is the one key takeaway you hope our listeners will hold on to?
I hope that this deep dive has encouraged everyone to really reflect on the role of faith and belief in their own lives. Whether Branham's message resonates with you or you approach it with a critical eye, I think his story prompts us to think about how powerful belief can be, the complexities of religious leadership, and the constant human pursuit of meaning and connection.
I love that. For anyone who's feeling inspired to learn more, I highly recommend checking out Branham's sermons.
Definitely.
They offer such a fascinating look into his theology and how he preached.
And, of course, Perry Greene's book, Personal Experiences with William Branham. It's a really captivating firsthand account of his ministry that lets you see the personal impact he had.
It's been really insightful to dive into the life and legacy of William Branham, a man who sparked both deep devotion and heated debate.
He really did. I think his story reminds us that faith is a complicated, multifaceted experience that can't always be easily defined.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep searching for what resonates with you.